go. And I'm going to go ahead and record. And we are live, fellas, regarding Texas Freemasonry. How you guys doing?
Good, good, bro.
Very good.
Brother Chris Menard put together our podcast for us regarding Texas Freemasonry. This is our first official live recording that we're going to try and do, and we've got brother Tony Lyons. So there's three of us brothers. There's brother Chris Menard, Tony Lyons, and myself, Brad Hoff. I'm the senior warden of Royce City Masonic Lodge, number 663 in Royce City, Texas. And Chris is our junior deacon, and Tony is our Tyler. And me and Tony are about to take some much larger positions in the lodge. And anyway, we wanted to get on and talk to a fellow brother. His name is Brother Bradley Kohanke. That's how you say your name, right? Kohanke?
Yes, it is.
All right. Well, welcome, Brother Kohanke. And I'd like to just kind of introduce you with a little bit of accolades and stuff I found on you.
Okay.
That you are or were part of the Texas Masonic Home and School Board.
Still am.
Still am. Yeah. Okay. That's cool. And you are in the Memorials Committee and Grand Masters Regional Coordinator.
Not anymore. I did that for a
Not
couple of
anymore.
years, but that was when I lived in San Antonio. I've since moved to Little Rock, Arkansas.
Oh, okay. But you were the 2019 Grand Orator, and you spoke about that in your book, which was a really cool part of the book. And you were DDGM of District 39B in 2017.
Yeah.
Who was the Grand Master then?
Jerry Kirby.
Jerry Kirby. Okay. So I'm a relatively new Mason, so I don't know who he was, but and then from 2014 to 2018, you were a part of the education committee.
Yeah, I think it was 2018. I mean 2014 to 2019, but
Okay, this is just what's on your profile on the.
yeah, they had me come back another year because they couldn't find anybody to replace me right away. So
Right.
I went back and did another stint for a year.
Yeah, and we'll kind of circle back to that because some of the stuff that I wanted to ask you about in your book is on that topic.
Okay.
But you were a past master of Davy Crockett Lodge, number 1225, and that's in San Antonio, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I did that
And
twice, and past master of Merit Lodge, 727.
there, and it says something about the PR to the SGIG for San Antonio, AASR, the Scottish Rite.
Yeah, yeah. I was his personal rep for the Valley of San Antonio from 2020 through 2023.
That's really cool.
So that
So,
was a fun.
yeah, I just want to show your book here, see if I can get it to not be blurry. Light Reflections. I've read through it twice and in the last month, and it's been really intriguing to me because the stories are very easy for me to read. I'm not much of a reader, and so the stories are really short and to the point, so I can it really grabs my attention and just kind of it's like a hammer.
Gives you something to
Um,
focus on for that day.
yeah, I mean, you even talked about a story about hammers in here, which
Yeah.
was kind of interesting. Uh, but the title is really cool. I really like the title, and I had a question on that. Basically it reminds me that I can explore masonry and topics and things and make my own interpretation of it. And you talk a lot about that in your book. Um, can you talk about that for a minute, or?
Yeah, I mean, you talking about the title and where it came from, or
Yeah, yeah,
um, yeah, a friend of mine, Chris Williams, and I, we used to write articles for the Lodge newsletter at Davy Crockett, and he would write an article about a fictional character named Big John Deacon. And it was a humorous article where we would go out to eat with Big John, and he would always stick us with the bill, and he would eat enormous amounts of food. But there was always this Masonic jewel of information that he would pass along to us, so we didn't ever get upset with him, you know. And so his stories were, yeah, they turned out to be 4 or 5 pages long. And so I wanted to kind of complement that, hit roughly the same topic, hit a shorter, fact-based um, approach, kind of a yin to his yang. You know, I wanted everybody who read the newsletter to have something that they would gravitate towards, and they would always get the same lesson, whether they read Big John Deacon or Light Reflections article.
Yeah.
And some people like the fictional stuff, and some people just want the meat. And so that's what I
Yeah.
was to provide.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty interesting. So like I was saying, I'm still a relatively new Mason, and so is Chris. Chris came in after me, and I've been a Mason for a couple of years. So I focused my first year on the whole, like the ritual side of it to kind of nail down that part of it.
Sure.
And because it was all so fresh that I really wanted to learn all the stuff. And then I started listening to this Masonic Improvement guys, and they mentioned you a lot, right? Yeah, and they mentioned you a lot, and so I got your book and just read it, and like it spoke to me a lot. Um,
No, I appreciate that. It was supposed to be along the lines of a chicken soup for the Mason's soul type of an approach, you know. So short stories, easy to digest, quick reads, but gives you something to think about, like Tony said, all day.
right, yeah. So kind of where are you? I wanted to kind of ask a little bit about you, like. Um, we talked about your past stuff that you did, and I was kind of wanting to check in with you and see kind of where you are right now in Masonry, and like, do you have any like future plans of kind of what you're looking to work toward? I thought I heard you say in the book or something that you're really into the comparative religion and philosophy type stuff.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah, that's always been kind of my focus in Freemasonry, and really ultimately the reason that I joined. You know, I've been kind of on this spiritual quest since about the age of 16, and um, ran across a bunch of books on Freemasonry back in the late 80s, early 90s, and you know, got me interested in Freemasonry. I wound up petitioning Davy Crockett Lodge and became a member back in '91. And
yeah,
you know, I was very active for a while, and then I kind of got disillusioned because I wasn't getting any education. You know, I mean I learned the ritual. I could help confer degrees. I I served as chaplain for the lodge in '93, '94. But you know, life got in the way. I had kids. I got married. I had a job change, and I just kind of lost interest for a while. And then when my dad passed away, um, and I talked about that in the book too, but
yes,
it really got me interested in going back because the guys from his lodge came out in mass for his funeral, and it really affected me. And so I
right.
decided I was going to go back, and all the things that I had searched for and couldn't find, I decided if I couldn't find it, I was going to try to find a way to give it. So that's when I started writing, and that's when I started doing lectures, and I guess it got me noticed because I wound up on the education committee and stuff.
Yeah,
But
yeah, it's good stuff. I really like it.
well, thanks.
Um, so in a lot of your stories, like so, like it seems like you were got a lot of stuff kind of going on whenever you're writing these articles that you put in the book, and a lot of times in the stories, you talk about like this last minute thing that happens when you're like, man, I don't know if I'm ever going to get this article done. I've got this going on and this going on, and you're trying to get that article in before the newsletter goes out, and then all of a sudden, the last minute, something happens, and you experience something that makes it all come together. Um,
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times that happened. I mean, there was one in particular that kind of stands out to me, and that was when I had gone out to lunch with a friend of mine who he was my best friend in college. And this is one of those relationships where you go out and you wind up spending way too much time out than what you had originally planned to do. And I needed to be back early that afternoon to work on the article. And he was like, "No, let's go do this, and no, let's go do that." And I'm panicking, because I'm held captive in his car and he's driving, and it's so I just, I got to go along. I got to go for the ride. And we wound up, there was this little cemetery that he wanted to go and visit in Selma, Texas. He passed it all the time and had never stopped to see it, but he wanted to read what was in there. And the next night we were giving out Lamar Awards and scholarships. And so I was trying to get this finished. I was trying to get the article finished. I was trying to get my speech for the award ceremony finished. We get out of the car and we go look at these gravestones, and it's one guy named Davenport who happened to be a Mason, and there was this whole thing about his history on his stone, and it talked about how he had founded the Masonic Lodge in Selma, Texas, and had built a schoolhouse and hired a teacher and paid for it out of his own pocket, and the lodge met on the second floor. And I was like, yeah, this is perfect. I can combine the article and the Lamar talk and everything. And it was one of those times, and it happens a lot where, I was just exactly where I was supposed to be. And if I just
yeah,
didn't fight it and worry about
yeah,
it too much, everything worked out.
yeah. That divine providence situation.
Yeah, it happens so much. And I remember I closed that chapter in the book with a quote from a song by Walt Wilkins called Trains I Missed. And he's singing a song about all of the things that he wished he would have done, all the things he did do that he wished he wouldn't have done. But then he talks about all the times he finds himself right where he's supposed to be.
Right.
And I closed it out with a quote from that song, and it was just really, really appropriate. So,
Yeah, it was great. Um, I guess so. There's this chapter you have on. It's in the beginning of the book. It's called the chapter "The Essential Zohar,"
mhm.
and you talk about this mountain climber and the mountain climber's view from the top would be the same thing if he's rode a helicopter to the top or climbed the mountain, but how he got there was different
Yeah.
and how he views himself different. That was really cool. I really like that.
Yeah, I tied that into our Masonic journeys and how important it is to go through the degrees and learn the ritual and learn the catechism, and how, as Masons, having gone through that gives us a completely different perspective on what it is that we're supposed to be doing, as opposed to somebody that just watched a special on Freemasonry on the History Channel. You know, they
Right.
they got the gist of what it is we do, but they didn't go through what we went through, and so they don't really understand.
Yeah.
So,
Uh, Chris, do you have anything to say on something like that? I
Uh,
mean, can you
man,
relate?
how long do y'all have? I absolutely I do because it was one of the things getting to be a little bit older of a guy now and going petitioning and becoming a Mason a little bit later. It's tough because this whole half of life has occurred and I've built this thing in my head that I consider to be reality, and the way that I interact with people and the way that I do things and the way I think about things. And then, pow, here comes this, the rituals, right? And just, and it kind of, hard part for me and brother, you know, fighting with that, right? The old life, and then kind of starting the veil is opening, right? The curtain's opening, and you're seeing things a different way, but still that old, habits are brutal, man. But yeah, absolutely, because
That's that stone being smooth.
it is, it absolutely is, man. But the problem is you recognize it now, whereas before you may have not understood that. And so I really get that, what you're saying, as far as taking the helicopter to the top of Everest. Okay, I got it, beautiful sight, I can see that on Google Maps. But climbing it, and I'm at base camp, I may not even be there yet,
Yeah, on the way there.
and some of that stuff is really tough, but I'm very thankful for it, as painful as it is, because the change is occurring. And I don't know if that makes sense to you all, but it really does to me.
Yeah,
It certainly
thank,
makes sense to me. I
yeah,
remember the changes.
They're
Still going
tough,
through
man.
them. Still going through them.
They're tough. Yeah, I don't think I'll ever be done.
Yeah, it's a
Or
lifelong journey, and that's one of the beauties of it.
yeah,
So
yeah. It's tough to be around your brothers and realize you're infantile. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's
We're all that big at the end of the day.
no, but I mean, for those that have been on the journey much longer, and to realize they're kind of looking at you and they're going, "Man, you don't know anything yet." But I'm
yeah,
having fun, and yeah, it's amazing. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me, brother Kahanki. I mean, what are some of the things that you see that, as far as getting out there, and I don't know how to actually put it, but as far as making somebody feel like I feel and be persuaded to take the path that I've taken. I mean, what are some words of encouragement, or what do you think should happen is to make that happen?
are you talking about
How could we
someone who
attract more? Is that what you're asking, Chris?
you
I
want
How,
I
how
think
people
to
to join
attract?
the fraternity or brothers to engage in more education and learning or
I think both. And like I said, man, at the top of this, how long do you have? Because I've got questions that'll never stop. But yes, absolutely. I mean, as far as to get someone like me to go, hey, this might be a good thing.
well, when it comes to attracting somebody to join the fraternity, um,
That's the age-old question.
yeah, we've got a lot to offer, and there's a lot of younger guys out there looking for what we have. Our problem is not so much generating interest or even having people inquire. Our problem is we don't deliver on our promise. And
yeah,
so,
man.
until we actually can provide the value that those guys are looking for in their Masonic experience, I'm not sure we're ready to receive a giant influx of new Masons. Um, but so we gotta get our house in order, and people have joined the fraternity over the years for a multitude of reasons, and a friend of mine, David Hill, always says Freemasonry is a big tent, and there's room for everybody. There's guys that want fellowship. There's guys that are interested in history. There's guys that join because their dad and grandfather were Masons. There's guys that are interested in the ritual, and then there's guys that are interested in the spiritual and philosophical education part of it, which is why I joined. So I can speak to those guys, but I don't discount anybody else. You know, their masonry is just as important to them as mine is to me. Now, once you get into it, you know, you're going to gravitate towards that group that thinks along the same lines that you do, and they're out there. Um, it has historically been difficult to find, but it's getting easier because of things like this, what you guys are doing, you know, and Masonic Improvement. You know, they go out and they meet everybody around the state and get to know them. And when somebody talks to them about potentially having an interest in joining or an interest in a particular aspect, they can hook them up. You know, they can point them in the right direction.
That's
So
right.
Yeah, I think
that would
that,
be my recommendation. You know, is to follow that model. Get out there, um, know the personalities of the lodges in your area, and then expand that into a larger geographic area, and then be able to point people in the right direction.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, and I think you mentioned so many reasons. Actually, there were multiple reasons that I petitioned. You know, part of it is that, you know, it's spiritual, that esoteric piece of it. Well, actually, not part of it. A huge part of it is wanting to learn, right? And then the other part of it is the brotherhood and the community and these other things. And I think we have that to offer, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like all three of us conversate about that often, because Brad's on a certain journey, I'm on a different journey than Chris, and but we all come together and share our experiences and why we're excited about it. I mean, we text each other all the time. Hey, I just did this or whatever. I mean, it's
You
us
know.
three. We kind of have a couple other guys here and there, but I mean,
Uh-oh.
we're constantly sharing
Here goes
our
brother. Yeah, there you go.
So when I became an EA, Tony was just being installed as the worshipful master of the lodge, and Tony is he's like, whenever I saw the worshipful master's how he was portraying the worshipful master, he was always there at every event we did. He was there at every meeting. He was always there whenever we did something with degrees or whatever. He helped me. He showed me where our practice place was, where I met my mentor, and he even showed up to the practice with me to kind of help me, you know. And my mentor ends up being a member of our lodge anyway, and was the worshipful master in 1970 of the lodge, our lodge. And anyway, I saw Tony in the way he was being the worshipful master and how he just was there. And that made such a huge impression on me because he was always there. We did little events where we brought our families out, and he was always at all of those things. And that just really, that brought the value for me. That's what I was looking for, was a brotherhood. But I found all these other things that I really like along the way. The ritual was really great, and then the education stuff, when I started finding it's just blowing my mind, and I'm really into that now too. So, but so thank you, Tony,
I was going to say
for
thank you. I had no idea.
for being
That
that
means a
great
lot.
example.
You
Awesome.
just never know the impact you have, huh?
True.
Yeah,
Very true.
Completely. I will second all of that Brad just said about Tony, because it was amazing. But I also find that my grandfather's gone, and so is my great grandfather. Lost way too soon. I've got the gold cufflinks, I've got dues cards and things like that, and in a way, it's an avenue for me to still have conversations with them. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody here, but
Yeah.
it's huge.
Y'all can relate. You can
Yeah,
understand
totally.
what they went through. Y'all climbed Mount Everest together,
Well, the
and
thing,
now you're still almost working towards that same view that they had.
well, yeah, I was a lot younger, didn't have any gray. I was barely. I don't even think I could drive yet. You know, by the time they were gone, So as an adult, I can finally have a conversation with them in a weird way. But it's a wonderful thing, whether that's the ritual or the study, the esoteric piece of it, and all that. And uh, Brother Kohanke, I mean, did you find that was true in your journey? That you're you, you had those same pieces, or no?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially after my dad and my grandfather were gone. Um, I when I joined, my dad was still around, and yeah, I knew he was a Mason growing up. I knew my grandfather was a Mason. He had the square and compass on his wall in his bedroom, and but they never talked about it because they didn't think they could.
Right.
And so all I knew was that they were gone a couple times a month. And they didn't have family nights. We never saw the inside of a lodge room. I never saw the inside of a lodge building, didn't even know where it was. And since they never talked about it, I figured, well, I guess I'm not Masonic material. And so I never really gave it much thought after that until I ordered a couple of books from a specialty bookstore, and one of them happened to be Duncan's Ritual. And the guy behind the counter said, "Are you a Mason?" And I said, "No." "Why?" And he goes, "Well, if you were a Mason, you wouldn't be able to have this book." And I was like, "Okay, give me two." He said, "Would you like to learn about Freemasonry from the Masons themselves?" And I said, "Sure." And that's when I visited Davy Crockett Lodge, filled out a petition, called my dad and said, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know I petitioned a Masonic lodge and my EA degree is on such and such a date." And he was like, "Oh my God, I thought you'd never ask." Like, well, why didn't you say something? Well, I couldn't. Well, you could have, but they didn't know. They didn't know they could. So,
Right.
That's so
Yeah, that
cool.
kind of brings me back to my next question that I had for you on the. So you did a chapter on the philosophy of Freemasonry,
mhm.
where you talk about uh, Jesus in there, and you kind of explain that he was a man, in this world or whatever, and we we I don't think you mentioned it in the chapter, but we actually count our time from when he was born. So, but you talked about the two greatest commandments and how they relate to Freemasonry, and I thought that was really interesting. Whenever they asked Jesus what the two greatest commandments were.
Yeah, they asked him, what's the most important commandment? And he said there were two. Love God
Right.
with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And that chapter, whether you're a Christian or not, you have to admit that he's a pretty important dude and probably
Yeah.
the greatest teacher of all time. And so the reason that I brought that up is because we get accused a lot of being anti-religion or being a religion or being anti-Christian or anti-Jewish or whatever. And no matter how many times we say we're not a religion, people just they're more interested in the conspiracy theory because it's more interesting, frankly. Um, but those are the two belief systems that are common to all major religions of the world, past and present. Love God with all your heart and soul and mind. He exists, he loves us, and he wants us to love one another. Well, the first one is the job of the church, the synagogue, the temple, the mosque, whatever. They tell you how to worship, who to worship, when to worship. They carry the keys to salvation. We don't have anything to do with that other than we require you to believe in something greater than yourself. We focus on the second thing, what it actually looks like in everyday life to love your neighbor as yourself, to
Yes.
show the world that we can love one another. We can disagree, but we can love one another. And that's why we call each other brother. That's why we establish this familial relationship. That's why we have our cable toes that are longer than anybody else's. We're willing to do for each other and the world at large. Frankly, in the closing charge of the Master's Lodge, these generous principles are to extend further. Every human being has a claim upon your kind offices. Do good unto all. Remember? So.
Yeah, that was really good. Um, so there, I was reading along. I don't remember what chapter it was in, but I had this really emotional experience when you were talking about Brother Keith Reynolds, and you went to a funeral,
Mm.
and y'all, the I think the preacher did his part, and then y'all rolled the casket, or was it like on a cart or something, and you brought it
Yeah,
down this path,
we
and then there,
we were
yeah,
at a cemetery, and I don't remember. It may have been Fort Sam, Houston. And they do this. I don't. It couldn't have been Fort Sam, but it was similar. They had a pavilion where the ceremony took place, and so the preacher would do his stuff under the pavilion, and then the hearse took the casket, and the family drove behind it to the actual grave so that we could do the ceremony around the Masonic ceremony around the grave. And the Masons were the pallbearers. Well, we pulled up to where the grave had been dug, and it was about 50 feet in from the road. And there were graves and headstones and stuff in between the road and where the grave had been dug. So there was no way that that cart with the casket on it was going to roll through the grass, maneuver around the headstones and all of that stuff. And and they were all kind of standing around wondering what to do. And Keith Reynolds popped up and said, "I'll carry my brother the last 50 feet."
wow,
And I had the same visceral response that you did. I almost got choked up when I was saying it.
I got chills, man, just
It
thinking
was
about it.
just, yeah, it was just such a perfect thing to say in the moment. And we all just, we didn't bat an eye. We just all went and grabbed a handle and carried him
It's powerful.
the last 50 feet, you know. I'll never
Yeah,
forget it. It was neat.
But that is the
yeah,
message, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That I mean, the whole message.
Yeah.
I
yeah,
think as far as what we do, that's the entire message to me.
Yeah.
Man, it's almost one of the
yeah,
first lessons I feel like we learn
Yeah.
when a brother's
Yeah.
in distress. You help
Well,
him out.
yeah. And it kind of goes back to what I was talking about, Tony. He didn't even know that what he was doing was making such an impact on me to really help me to launch me in the right direction and Masonically. Um, we never know what kind of effect you're going to have on somebody that will ripple outward, um, and create huge waves down the road. So just being there, like for the funerals or for just the family nights or whatever, we all need something.
yeah.
Um, Speaking of kind of emotional experiences in your book, the last thing I really wanted to ask you about was, you talked a couple of times in your book about the brothers from Clear Lake Lodge, 1417,
Mhm.
and when they came out to your dad's funeral, and how the Worshipful Master invited you to I guess they had a EA degree or something. Um,
Yeah, they were having some sort of a get together that night. And
yeah, but you had a lot of family stuff and you couldn't make it. But you talked about how the impression they made on your mind, and you talked about it in the OLT. Like you told stories about it like for years. Um, and then I don't want to ruin the your part of the end of the story where you were teaching, or you went to go teach at that little Masonic lodge and saw the car. You know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about?
so I'll try to go through it.
Yeah.
When my dad was sick and knew that he didn't have much time left, he told me what he wanted with regard to his remains and his funeral and stuff. He wanted to be buried wearing his apron. He wanted to be buried wearing his 14th degree Scottish Rite ring, and he wanted a Masonic service. So I called Clear Lake Lodge um, after he had passed away and told him when the funeral was, and it was the week of Thanksgiving, and the secretary assured me that they would be there, and I think it was, I think it may have been even the day before Thanksgiving, but 18 of their guys showed up for that
Wow.
program, and that by itself was a huge impact on me. Um, and this was at a time when I had stopped going to lodge. I had been disillusioned and disappointed and wasn't getting the education that I thought I wanted from Masonry. And then that happened, and I was like, okay, well, there's more to this than just what I want. There's more to Freemasonry than just my own personal desires. And so we went through the service. My wife commented that the Masonic service was more meaningful than the religious service was, and I agreed. I thought so too. I was able to stand up there with him with my apron on and evergreen in my pocket and everything. When it was over,
Yeah.
we went back to the chapel, and that's when their worshipful master came up and introduced himself and said, I know it's a rough time for you, but we're having a get together at the lodge tonight, and you are more than welcome to join us, and we would love to have you. I thanked him, and told him, I got family in from Ohio and all over the country, and I really kind of got to take care of them, but I really appreciate the invite. And it made a big impression on me. So I decided then and there that I was going to come back to Freemasonry, and that I wanted to be that guy. I wanted to be like their worshipful master. I wanted to be able to provide comfort in a difficult situation when somebody needed it. I just, it was a calling. I wanted to give back somehow. And that's when I started teaching and writing and doing these talks and lectures. And after having done it for a number of years, I got a call from Bernie Lodge outside of San Antonio. It's Kendall Lodge in Bernie, Texas. And Clear Lake is between Galveston and Houston, and I live in San Antonio, so 300 some odd miles away. So I go out to Kendall Lodge. I get there early because I wasn't sure how long it was going to take me to get there, and I'm going over my talk for the night. And it's a past masters night, so I'm talking about the role of past masters. And this Suburban pulls up in front of the lodge, and it just sits there for the longest time. And I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe the doors aren't unlocked yet, and they're waiting for the worshipful master. They're waiting for Tony to show up with the key, right? But then I see this guy kind of making his way around the back of the Suburban, and he opens the back and he pulls out a wheelchair, and his wife is sitting in the front seat on the passenger side. And I thought, okay, well, that's what the deal is. She's not getting that because she needs a wheelchair. He's having difficulty. He's going to get the wheelchair for her. Well, he gets the wheelchair out and promptly sits down in it, closes the hatch, and then wheels over to the passenger side door, opens the door for his wife. She gets out, she walks fine. And then they go in together, him in the wheelchair and her walking next to him. And I'm like, wow, that was really cool. He's a gentleman. I mean, this is the ultimate gentlemanly thing to do. He's in a wheelchair, but by God, he's going to open the door for his wife. What a Mason, what an example to set. So I decided I'm going to go and meet this guy because I want to know a little bit about him, and I want to be that guy too. I want to be able to do the gentlemanly things for as long as I can. And he's provided an example. So I go in and I introduce myself and I'm like, my name's Brad. And he introduced himself. His name was Charles Harvey. And we got to talking and he says, well, where are you originally from? And I said, well, I grew up in Houston, but I was born in Port Clinton, Ohio. And he said, really? I'm from Ohio. And I was like, really? Where? And he said, Sandusky, I think is what he said, and which is like 30 minutes from Port Clinton. I'm like, wow, that what a coincidence. And he goes, you said you're
Yeah.
from Houston originally? And I said, yeah, I grew up in Clear Lake City. My dad worked for NASA. And he said, Clear Lake, really? I lived in Nassau Bay until I moved to Bernie a couple of years ago. And I'm like, wow.
Wow.
So Nassau Bay is like 20 minutes from Clear Lake. And I said, yeah, my dad was a Mason in Clear Lake. He was a member of Clear Lake Lodge number 1417. He goes, well, so was I. And I was like, okay, well, this is really getting weird at this point. And so I told him the story of the worshipful master, back when my dad had passed away and what an impact he had made and how much I wanted to be like that guy and provide support to somebody during a difficult time. And he asked me what year that was, and I told him, and he said, that was the year I was worshipful master. And it was him. And I'm like, oh my God, it's 10 years later, 300 miles on a different part of the state. And the same guy that had such an impression on me the first time was the same guy that had the impression on me the second time. So when I told Tony, you never know what impression you're going to make on somebody, this guy had no idea the impression he had made on me twice, but
Were you
Yeah.
getting the
forget
clue?
it.
No.
And I stayed in touch with him for years after that. So, what a
Yeah.
guy. Charles Harvey.
Yeah.
Great architect was
Yeah.
trying to tell you something there.
Oh man, I'm telling you. I guess I made the right decision to come back to Masonry, right?
But,
Well,
well,
Yes,
we're
you did.
thankful
what,
that you have.
actually, Brother Kohanke, that's a perfect segue because I was going to ask you to kind of go in and maybe fill in some of the blanks when what would you offer to a Mason, new, old, in the middle, whatever, that is losing, that steam. That's not. They're losing their engagement. It's not what it used to be for whatever reason. What are your thoughts on that as far as how do you pull out of that spin? How do you get back to that original point, the original time?
Well, for me, I had to go back to the original reason why I joined to begin with. And then I had to seek out like-minded people. And I knew they were out there. And this was before podcasts. This was really before the internet was as big as it is. So, finding them was difficult. But if you start talking about what your interests are, somebody will say something. Either, oh yeah, I'm interested in that too, or oh gee, you sound like Tony. You guys should get together and talk about that kind of stuff. And that's how I found my people, And because there wasn't any kind of formalized educational programs that were going on at the time in the lodges, I decided to start a philosophical roundtable. And I would just invite guys who had an interest in those topics. And I would make a reservation at a local restaurant where they had a room that we could close off from the rest of the restaurant. We would get there, we would fellowship, we would have a drink, we would order dinner. I would pose a question for the evening, and then after dinner, after the wait staff had cleared the tables, we excused them out of the room, and everybody got 5 minutes to kind of give their view on the question for the evening. And that kind of led to an explosion of those types of things happening all around the area. And then when I got involved in officer leadership training and expanded on that, the guys, I think for the most part, really liked it and took it back to their own lodges and districts and started doing it. So like I tell Justin and Dennis at Masonic Improvement, if you're interested in that kind of stuff, um, it's out there. And
Had to seek it.
this inner circle that always gets talked about by the conspiracy theorists as a hierarchy doesn't really exist. You know,
Right.
we have leadership in the fraternity, but it's administrative leadership. It's not philosophical leadership. Um, so the inner circles that those guys are looking for are those little teeny philosophical roundtables that are going on all over the place. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
if you're lucky enough to be at a lodge that provides education at every stated meeting, good on you. That's even better. But not everybody does that. Not everybody's interested in that. So
For sure.
Right.
that was my passion. So whatever your passion is, pursue it. And if it's not being offered, um, try to arrange it yourself and
Create
provide
it.
it for others. You know.
Yeah.
That's
But there are like-minded people out there. You just got to find them.
And not to switch too quickly, but you touched on something that is one of my favorites, and it is the conspiracy theory.
Mhm.
I love that. I'm sorry, I do. It is fictional, fun reading to me. It's like watching a sci-fi movie. I love the crazy stuff that people say. Sorry, I just do.
Yeah, I read it too. I mean,
Well,
entertaining.
it's hard to ignore, right?
yeah,
The moment that somebody finds out that you are a Mason, however that is, it seems impossible for them to go, you know.
and it's amazing how much more they know about your fraternity than you do, even though you're the member and they're
I'm like,
Yeah.
we're still trying to figure out what to have for dinner. So if you think we're
right.
running your country,
Yeah, my buddy keeps asking me, when are you guys going to do something? I'm like, what do you mean? What do you want us to do? We can't even decide when we're going to have our pancake breakfast,
we just gave out
let
a
alone pull the secret levers of government.
yeah, we just a scholarship, man. We just did that.
Hey,
Sorry,
Yeah,
sorry,
man.
brother Hoff. I didn't mean to
No,
hijack you,
that
man.
was all I had. There's so much more in this book. You have education pieces from Texas history. You talk about Mary Louis Lamar. You talk about the Battle of San Jacinto and how Texas Masonry started. You talked about why is it so hard to talk about Masonry, and then you went on to explain like this deal about something that sounded like Freemasonry. And at the end of the chapter, you said it was something completely different, and I was like, "Wait a minute, what?" It kind of blew me away.
yeah, that started
Uh,
off as an educational program I used to give to family nights, and I had a slideshow that went with it, and I would I would tell the guys, I was at an event, my son, where a gentleman came up to me and noticed my lapel pin from a fraternity that I had belonged to and wanted to know more about it. So I told him, and I went through, we have different levels that you participate in. You have to prove you're uh, worthy by doing some memorization work. There's a secret handshake. There's all this stuff that goes along with it. And I'm going through all these things one at a time, and everybody's kind of going, yeah, yeah, yeah. They know exactly what I'm talking about. And then I say, okay, now I'm going to tell that story again, only this time I'm going to show images of all the memory work, the secret handshake, everything that goes along with it. Are you guys okay with that? And everybody's like, no, no, because the wives are there, No, you can't do that. You can't do that. So I'm like, well, I'm going to do it anyway. And I hit the button, and it's the Boy Scouts. So yeah, it's
yeah,
just as easy to talk about Masonry as it is to talk about the Boy Scouts or the Cub Scouts or the Weeblos or whatever. But
right.
that was the point I was trying to make. You can be informative without disclosing the secrets. Uh,
Sure.
I
And
think every major corporation does it every day to us.
yeah, well, hey, I'm
You
a
know,
retired HR executive, so I'm really good at talking a lot without saying anything.
Well, I didn't have any other real questions for you. I mean, I encourage anybody who watches this podcast to go out there and buy this book. It's on audiobooks as well, read by AI, I believe, and it sounds pretty cool. Um, and then the book itself is really good too. It's like I said in the beginning, it's really easy to read the small chapters because they're like a couple of pages really. And so I'm a busy guy, so I and my mind gets distracted really easy. So I can read a chapter and then set it down and be like, okay, that was really good Masonic food right there, and I can go about my day on that. But anyway, I thank you for coming out. Did you have any kind of closing statements on your
I
book or anything that
I got one
you want
more.
to?
I got one more.
Okay,
It,
go ahead.
what is Brother Kohenke up to next?
Yeah.
So I mentioned earlier that I moved from San Antonio to Little Rock, and so I am now living in Arkansas, but I still come to Texas a lot. Matter of fact, I'll be down there in June for two installations and the
Wow.
centennial celebration for the San Antonio Scottish Rite. Um, but I have joined the Scottish Rite up here, and they have made me the chairman of their education committee for the state for the Scottish Rite, which is kind of where my passion lies. Um, but I also joined a Blue Lodge up here, so I am a member of several lodges in Texas and now also in Arkansas and Wyoming. Um, but for me, I've got monthly Zoom class that is there's two of them. One of them is a book club, and we talk about one chapter out of a book every month. And the book that we're on right now is The Secret Teachings of All Ages. And I know you've got your copy. Uh,
Guitar
it's the
down. Sorry, guys.
third Monday of every month, and this month the chapter on stones, metals, and gems.
Gems. Yes.
And
Greatness.
I just finished putting my presentation together, and there is some fascinating stuff about Gemini and the two pillars that I'm really going to elaborate on. And then we also have a class up here where we go through one of the degrees in the Scottish Rite once a month, and that's on Zoom. That's the third Tuesday of every month. In addition to that, I'm working on another book, so hopefully that'll be out this year. It's
Nice.
Freemasonry's Ties to the Ancient Mystery Schools. And I think I
Well,
alluded to a couple of them toward the end of this book as a teaser. So,
yeah.
You got three fans. You got three fans.
well, thank you. I
So
appreciate that.
that is great. Is there stuff that online? Is there anywhere that we can find? Uh, I mean, what you're doing and what you're involved in right now.
Yeah, if you're interested in the Secret Teachings class, send me your email address and we'll add you to the invite list,
Okay, cool.
and you'll get a notification every month on that. Or in
What
addition to that, if anybody else is interested, they can join.
what is your email so they know where to send it?
Okay, it's
Hey, Chris,
Kohanke.
can you
I'm
post that on here somehow?
gonna
Yeah,
put it in the chat.
definitely, absolutely. I just didn't know if it was follow Amazon type thing, or
Kohanke at sbcglobal.net is my email address.
perfect.
Perfect.
Oh,
Excellent.
that's pretty easy.
And if you go on Facebook and you join Scottish Rite of Freemasonry in San Antonio, Texas, then you'll automatically get the invites to those classes also. That's
Wonderful.
probably the easier way to do it.
Are you able to join that even if you're not part of Scottish Rite yet?
Yeah, for this class, yeah, you only have to be a Master Mason.
Okay.
So,
Excellent.
Okay.
That was all I had, Brad.
Well,
I'm sorry.
brother.
that's
Yeah, brother Kahanke. Yeah, thank you so much again for your time.
Yes.
I don't have anything else, and I really appreciate you coming on our first official podcast. It's been great experience.
well, it's
Thank
been
you.
an honor. I appreciate being the first guest, and good luck to you guys. Thank you for doing this. I think the more things like this that happen, the better. So, good luck to you and
Right.
much success.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you much.
Right.
Appreciate you, brother.
All right. Well, thank you. All right. Do you just close it out, or what do you do here?